teaching?
I like to see it as a network. People interconnected and with a joint goal, if you like. A joint way of looking at spiritual development. A spirituality that's not about dogma and trying to get to the core ideas behind what spirituality is.
And how would you explain the philosophy behind Charmaine?
Well, I suppose when I think about spirituality and what people really mean by that word, I kept coming up with ideas like compassion, ideas like non-violence, and these core underlying things that seem to be in any spiritual idea. This idea of connecting with something greater than ourselves, or something sacred. This idea of exploring our own symbolic language, maybe in some sense. So if you bring all those things together, that's sort of where the philosophy has grown out of. So that led me to explore writers on non-violence like Leo Tolstoy and there's Gandhi, lots of people who talked about those sorts of things. And I think if you start from that kind of foundation, then it takes you in a very powerful direction. It's about putting it into real practice. So that's what led me to veganism as well. Trying to live a more compassionate life and excluding the need to kill things really unnecessarily. Or exploit them even.
So sort of coming from a place of compassion and non-violence. And is that influenced by your travels or by other people, spiritual masters that you've worked with? I know you spent some time in India when you were younger. Do you think that's influenced any of your work?
I was definitely quite inspired by the Jain tradition, which is heavily focused on non-violence and not harming anything, or as much as is feasibly possible. So India did have an impact, but I think as well my own roots were there was a lot of violence and a lot of I grew up on a tower block in a housing estate in London, so there was a lot of drugs, a lot of violence around me, so I suppose it was also wanting to look into that and say, what causes this? How can we move away from this? How can we develop or evolve in a sense so that we don't go that route? I suppose my experiences, I see them as steps in a process of changing who I am.
That's strange because I grew up on an estate in northwest London. Very rough estate, and I grew up around that kind of daily violence and stabbings and drugs and murder and that kind of thing, regular occurrence. And I remember kind of being a witness to it all going on around me, and of course I was really lucky to have a very loving, compassionate family, so there was never any of that within my family unit. It was all external to my family. But looking at other people involved in it and just thinking, why can't you see what you're doing? Why don't you step back from it? Why do you carry on with this kind of violence? And of course that just creates more violence. And I just recently have spoken to quite a few people who are leading workshops and working with people and again practicing kind of a very non-violent, very compassionate lifestyle, who have all come from backgrounds growing up witnessing that kind of a lifestyle. And I do wonder, I'm actually really thankful that I grew up seeing that, so that I can really move away from it and actively.
Well, I think it teaches you something. And it, I suppose, it's reminded me to keep that as a focal point in some sense. I'm writing a book as well, and in the book, it's a spiritual book. And it's also got my out-of-body experiences and all those things. But I also wanted to include something about the social stuff and to really say, well, all of these things are amazing experiences and they're, really personally transformative, but they also can lead to something that's to do with society as well. Has a bigger importance. So and violence, I think we almost internalise it.
Yeah.
Even people who maybe have never experienced violence around them.
Yeah.
There's even this thing of, like back to sort of TV and films and
Yeah.
the news, and we just take all this stuff in.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I do wonder whether it's quite toxic to society.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's actually really damaging, but there seems to be an obsession with it. And the thing that I find strange is that I've never ever been able to watch violent films or horror movies, anything like that. Never ever. And my friends always thought it was really funny. Oh, you're such a wuss. Come on, watch this film. I said, I don't want to, because I'd always be so badly affected by it. Like, I feel like I'm there. I feel like I'm feeling those things that are happening. And my friends would laugh and say, it's only a story. And I'd say, okay, well, for me, it's not just a story, because the fact that somebody can write something like this bothers me. And the fact that when I'm watching it, I feel like I'm in it also bothers me. Yet my friends, who are the most compassionate, lovely people, can apparently watch this kind of violence and not be affected in any way, can seem to detach from it, dissociate from it totally, which I still find quite odd. And I've never ever been able to do that, and I just wonder if I'm that little bit more open or a little bit more sensitive. But I do believe on some level it affects everyone, because it's got to go somewhere.
I think it does. I think ultimately, if you think about advertising, advertising is designed to affect people, and
even subliminally, however it's going in.
Yeah, it's designed to influence your choices, and even if it's just things that we pay attention to, or whether we're that slight little bit more likely to say, oh yeah, that war in Iraq is okay.
That's exactly.
Just these tiny little
it's quite
things.
dangerous, really, and it's accumulative, isn't it? So it's kind of constantly tapping away. So the book that you're writing at the moment, is it incorporating all these different things that are happening
it's
to
like
you?
a journey. It's talking about all the things I've experienced and tying that all into a philosophy, basically.
And does writing it help you really reflect back on it and understand how it all worked and why it went a certain way?
I think so. I see my life almost like an ongoing initiation.
Yeah.
Like constant points in a sort of journey. So I think all of those events led to something,
Yeah.
So I think that's why with the book I really wanted to really talk about these things, because there's so many good books out there, but they talk very much just about changing what's going on a very basic internal level, which is very important, but I also think you change the outside as well, It has an impact, I think you can put people into a horrendous scenario and say, okay, we'll be really positive, and there'll be very few people that will be able to do it. We are sort of human and we have our weaknesses. So I think being aware of the environment, by which I mean society around you, the things that are going on, it's very important to that whole process as well.
Yeah. And more people, I think, are getting interested in some form of transformation, some form of change. People seem to be, including myself, really waking up to changes and just a different way of living. And I don't know, the media again is giving out all these messages of doom and gloom all the time, but equally a lot of transformative, positive things are happening. So, and I wonder if it's almost an equal balance. It's quite interesting, but I read this quote the other day basically, and it was saying that the crime levels are going up, but so are sales of spiritual books. What does that mean? I mean, and who knows, but at least trying to focus on the positive things rather than the negative things. Because I have spent a lot of my time, it's very simple, but I have spent a lot of my time driving, and I'm starting to really resent